So for 1.4, we are going to measure angles. Sweet. If I take two rays, now remember by definition a ray has an endpoint and then another point, but if I take two rays and connect them at the endpoint, I get an angle. So I'm going to label this. We'll call this A, we'll call this B, and C. This right here is what we call an angle. The sides of the angles are rays, so let's write that down. Sides of an angle are rays. And the endpoint, well, let me move this over here. The endpoint of both rays is what we call the vertex. Okay? So now how do we name this thing? Well, to name an angle, there's a couple ways you could do it. First of all, you can name it by the vertex and just say angle A. Since A is the end point, I can make that little line that says angle and then A. Another way I could do it is I can list all of the points in the angle, but I have to make sure that the vertex or the end point is in the middle. In other words, I could say angle, starting with B, put B, then going to A, then going to C. Another way I could do that is I could start at C, then going to A, then going to B. And sometimes we'll even give the angle another name or letter for the angle that will sometimes be written here. So I could do this, put the number 1 there. If I did that, then we would call this angle number 1. That's how we name them. Okay. So now, what are the sides? Well, the sides are the rays. So this side is A, B, and I put the arrow going in one direction because that's the label of the ray. And then the other side is A, C, with the arrow going in the direction. Notice that the vertex is the first point on both rays. Okay, we have to be very specific about that. If I screw up the order, then I'm saying something completely different. One last thing I'd like to mention. This area right here we call the interior angle, which means the inside. And all this stuff outside here we call the exterior. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay.
Was that example 1 or
No?
no? Okay.
About ready to do example 1. Okay, I got to define some things first. Example 1 involves an angle, so I wanted to make sure that you knew what an angle was. I'm sure you guys know this. It's probably reviewed for most of you, but it doesn't hurt to go over it again. So now for example number 1, we have some angles. And so the first thing it says for us to do in example 1 is it says what are two other names for angle 1. Okay? What are two other names for angle 1? Yes?
Would one be angle J and K?
Angle J, M, K. And somebody else had their hand up? Yes?
Would you just say angle M? Would you, use
You could do that. What else?
Well, I have a question.
Yes?
When you just do single letter, could it be any point in that vertex, or does it have to be the vertex? We name only one letter.
The vertex always has to be in the middle. So you could, another way you could do it is you could say K, M, J. Now I am going to warn you about something. I said you could do it this way, but I want to point something out to you guys. If I just say angle M, is it really angle 1 or angle 2, and how do you know?
You don't know.
You don't know.
In this case.
Yeah.
So in this case, although we could call it angle M, it might not be the best idea, right? Just because when the reader looks at it, it might not work out. But they only asked for two other ways to name it. These would be the best, okay? The other thing that they want us to try to do, can we do the same thing? Can we come up with two more names for angle KML? Well, I would say that we could definitely say angle 2, and we could say angle LMK. Now what I want to point out to you guys is that the vertex for both of these angles are always going to be M, and it's always going to be in the center if you use all 3 points to label it. In this particular scenario, though, we could call it angle M. I would caution against that because there's two angles that are connected to each other, and angle M doesn't necessarily define whether it's angle 1 or angle 2. Does that make sense? Okay.